On today's show, Draymond Green suspended again, this time indefinitely after his incident involving Phoenix Suns center Jusuf Nurkic. Was this a fair or unfair punishment for Draymond Green? How will the Warriors and NBA handle this Draymond situation moving forward? Plus, some interesting commentary from Warriors general manager Mike Dunleavy Jr. Could the Warriors look to shake things up here in the not-so-distant future and maybe Draymond Green included in a trade package? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so simple to play. You can make your picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, which is what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app on the market. And with basketball season here and in full swing, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you can do LeBron James plus Travis Kelce in a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus reception. So if you've been thinking about getting into daily fantasy sports, you've got to give Prize Picks a chance. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for that first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Warriors, Cyrus Saatsaz, who you can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Warriors, here to talk about Draymond Green, who finds himself on the wrong side of I guess there's not a right side of a suspension, but suspended indefinitely after his incident involving center Jusuf Nurkic for the Phoenix Suns earlier this past week. Draymond with the flailing, clearly at least clear to me, be pretty intentional, striking of Nurkic, right? He argued that he was trying to break free from Nurkic, and then he spun around and struck him in the head. Nurkic was down on the ground. Is this whole thing, and this is just, Cyrus, it's another in a long line of incidents involving Draymond Green. There was a lot of question marks about how the NBA was going to choose to handle this, and they decided to hand out the indefinite suspension. So let's kind of start with just your reaction to this, situation with Draymond. Yet another situation with Draymond coming not even a few weeks after, not even after the chokehold that he put Rudy Gobert in and was suspended for 5 games already this season. So your reaction to this latest incident from Draymond.
It's the incident that I think it's the straw that broke the camel's back. What I mean by that is it's hard to find anyone defending Dray now. Even his most ardent supporters are kind of staying quiet on this one, if not even criticizing him along with everyone else. It's indefensible. I mean, there's it's just been too much of the violence, of the contact. There are some weird, interesting wrinkles. Like, for example, I think Gilbert Arenas and someone else brought up the fact that all these incidents involve, with the exception of LeBron James in the 2016 finals, they all involve international players, whether it's Steven Adams, whether it's Domantas Sabonis, whether it's Nurkic, whether it's Rudy Gobert. So I'm guessing that's random in all this. I don't know if Draymond Green is targeting international players, but regardless, it's just, there's no defense to it. It's one of those things where it was a little surprising seeing the indefinite tag. I was personally expecting a more hard number, like 20 games. I was expecting a hammer to drop, a clear-cut statement. Instead, we got the more empathetic response from the NBA, the compassionate response. Almost, there's a weird sentimentality with this suspension because people are, even Nurkic, even Gobert, are sympathizing with Draymond. Happy's seeking help. Maybe he needs it. Who knows? But there was a meeting late last week with Draymond Green, his agent Rich Paul, and the commissioner to figure out what this is going to mean, what the steps forward are. For example, like what does counseling mean exactly, right? First of all, the NBA didn't use that word. Shams Charania reported that part of the wrinkle here in terms of how to get rid of the suspension was to get some sort of help in the form of counseling. But who knows what that means even? I mean, does that mean a psychiatrist? Are we talking medicine? Is he going to talk this out with therapeutic means, with a psychologist? Who knows? There's a lot of details here that are murky. But I think the bottom line is he went too far. For those still defending him, I know for a lot of people, he went too far a while ago, if not fairly recently with Gobert. But I think in almost everyone's eyes, it's now near unanimous. He's gone too far. He needs help. And and the interesting thing, I think, on top of everything else, is when he comes back, was this a product of frustration? Meaning, like, is this a declining player who is lashing out? Is this something rooted psychologically that he needs help for? We're gonna find out, but it is crazy.
And what I'm trying to wrap my head around here is, look, first off, the indefinite tag. I think in every indefinite suspension that the NBA has handed out historically, it's gone maybe 8 or 9 games before the indefinite tag was lifted.
Correct.
We most recently saw the indefinite tag with Ja Morant, and then he was out for 8 or 9 games while he did his recovery process and everything, and then he got the subsequent suspension that he's still serving currently in this season. But the indefinite tag only got him the 8 or 9 games last year. At this point, it feels like Dray is going to spend some time away. He's still being allowed to practice, I believe, right, with the team while serving the suspension.
Yeah, he's going to be around the team. He's practicing with the team. I don't think he's allowed to be with the team for games and shoot arounds and stuff like that. But yes, my understanding is, and Mike Dunleavy Jr. addressed the media a bit with that. You know what's stuck out to me, because Mike Dunleavy Jr. does not do a lot of interviews, and neither did his predecessor, Bob Myers. They'd have their occasional press conferences and whatnot, but they didn't really make themselves super open to the media, like weekly, interview sessions or anything like that. So Dunleavy Jr. addressed the media following a practice in LA during one of the team's recent road trips. And what I found more interesting than all the Draymond talk was his verbiage pertaining to the Warriors in general, and what's going to happen if they don't get above 500 in the next 15 or 20 games, because Mike Dunleavy Jr. alluded to potentially big changes coming. So I'm honestly, my focus is much more on the basketball side of things, because you're right. When it comes to indefinite suspensions, you can deduce it's going to be likely 8 or 9 games. You mentioned Ja Morant. Malik Monk, oddly, I forgot about this, had an indefinite suspension. Our mutual friend and colleague Nick Angstad did some great research on the indefinite suspensions of recent NBA history. Gilbert Arenas was indefinitely suspended for the gun issue in the locker room, and that ended up being 8 or 9 games. Yeah, and there's a couple other indefinites, like Donald Sterling is I think the ugliest, and that one was permanent. I don't think we ever saw him again, and justifiably so.
Still sitting as indefinite. No, but
it's still there. Yes. Yeah. But the point is, it's going to be 8 or 9 games. But I'm much more fascinated with the basketball side of things and seeing what's going to happen to the Warriors, because the fan base, rightfully so, is not happy. And if you look at the product, I don't think you even need to be an expert to look at this Warriors team and think to yourself, this is not the same Warriors. They're not dominating like they used to be. A lot of the veterans, even though Klay Thompson the last few games in the last week or so has turned the season around offensively, and we're seeing some switch with Andrew Wiggins as well, but this is not the same team. And I'm very curious to see what happens if the team stays where they are as a 500 or below organization 20 games from now, because Dunleavy Jr. is talking a big game that we might see some changes, and I'm curious to know what those are.
And, as this kind of pertains, potentially including Draymond here, in depending on how this situation resolves itself, what he looks like when he does come back. I don't want to say if he comes back, when he comes back, more than likely, however long he serves the indefinite suspension. You kind of hinting at, Mike Dunleavy's comments, the big changes. I mean, who would be, in your eyes right now, if there were to be a big sweeping change made? Is there a player or players on this Warriors team that you could see Mike Dunleavy saying, you know what? All right, you're on the trading block. Here's a piece, and could maybe that's Draymond with the way that he's kind of handled himself and his behavior, the suspensions. Maybe there's a team out there that thinks that Draymond is the piece that they need to put them over the top, and the Warriors might be able to actually get, you know, some significant value back for him potentially.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point you bring up, because there are some people who think Draymond Green doesn't have a lot of trade value, and my pushback to that always is, did you see what Dillon Brooks got with the Houston Rockets? There is a demand and a need for basketball teams when it comes to players who can actually play defense, who like to play defense, who take pride in it. And in Draymond's situation, there's that added caveat of having not just world championship experience, a dynasty experience. I mean, I think there's a lot of teams that would want that. So I don't think it's out of the question. I think more realistically, though, Chris Paul would be the most likely trade target, just because you don't have that sentimental attachment to him like you do with some of these other players. He wasn't a part of any championships. His contract is expiring, which makes him more appealing to a lot of teams looking to just bring on a salary that's going to be off the book soon. They do have a lot of draft picks, not in the upcoming draft, but beyond that, the Warriors do have picks that they could deal. Look, me personally, I'm at a point where I really hope the Warriors start looking to trade Jonathan Kuminga and maybe even Moses Moody. And this is not because I want those players traded. I think very highly of Kuminga. I think the potential is there for a player who could become a star, if not a superstar someday. And even to a lesser extent, I feel that way with Moses Moody as well. But Steve Kerr is stubbornly refusing to give these kids minutes, even when they're producing. For example, we're recording this tonight, immediately following the Warriors beating the Trailblazers, and they barely squeaked by that game against one of the worst teams in the NBA. They were doing fine in that game when Kuminga was playing in the first half. He got a long run. He finished the game with a positive net rating, but Kerr benches him for most of the second half so he can give Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson a run. Both those players finished in the negative with net rating. They did make their shots, and I think Kerr's bigger picture here is he feels strongly that these veterans can still lead the Warriors to a championship. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but in the process, he's hindering the development of these two young players who are both in their third year. And if this is how Kerr feels about them, if he doesn't trust them, trade them, get something back while you can, and don't hurt these players in the process. I mean, their development is being hindered tremendously. And I see their confidence getting shell-shocked with each game where they're playing less than they should. So on me personally, I think you could and maybe should involve the youngsters, because you could probably get something back for them. There's a lot of teams out there who look at Kuminga and see value there. But I think Chris Paul would be the most pragmatic player. I don't think Klay Thompson would be traded, even if there's a possibility he won't come back next year because of a difference in contract demands. Wiggins, I don't know if he has value for a trade partner. So the logical step would be Chris Paul.
How will the Warriors and the NBA continue to monitor and handle the Draymond Green situation moving forward with the indefinite suspension? And will the Warriors have a big move or some sweeping changes coming down the pipeline, as alluded to potentially by Dunleavy? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Warriors. Cyrus, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Always a pleasure, man. Thank you.